A public servant widely recognized for his accomplishments in public sector leadership, John Tedesco currently serves as a member of the Wake County School Board, the largest school system in North Carolina and the 16th largest in America. Elected with nearly 77% of the vote to represent a district with over 100,000 people. Since that time, he has served in various leadership posts, including Vice Chairman of the Board of Education, Chairman of the Student Assignment Committee, Vice Chairman of the Student Achievement Committee, and Chairman of the Economically Disadvantaged Task Force. As a member of the Wake County School Board of Education, Tedesco leads a system with 165 schools, a $1.4 billion budget, 153,000 children, and 18,000 employees. John and his colleagues successfully led the effort to reduce the Wake County public school system budget by more than $100 million. That sounds like a good Republican. While still protecting the students and all the system's teachers. In addition, they launched one of the largest parental choice student assignment plans in the nation. John has spent over a decade helping tens of thousands of children here and across America. The oldest of 6 siblings, he credits his Christian faith and education as the keys to his rise from extreme poverty and the foundation of his relentless drive. Following the death of his mother, John moved to Garner to help raise his 3 youngest siblings who were in Garner Middle and High School and now attend Wake Technical Community College. John is a dedicated family man. He, his wife Jennifer, and their son Gabriel are proud residents of Garner, where they attend Victory Fellowship Church. John earned his bachelor's degree in political science with a concentration in public administration from Thiel College in Greenville, PA, just north of where he grew up in the Pittsburgh area. His unique background and expertise on educational issues has earned him national recognition. John's views and aggressive challenge to the status quo have been highlighted on Fox News, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, The Economist, and CNN. His commitment is to all children, families, and taxpayers. He is frequently quoted stating, "Public education takes care of other people's children with other people's money and needs to stand accountable for both." It is my pleasure and honor to introduce our candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction for North Carolina, John Tedesco.
I'm not usually much of a podium guy, and I tend to be a little loud. So I want to first ask you to bear with me. My wife Jenny she's a sweetheart and a Southern belle who had never crossed the Mason-Dixon line until she met me. And she's routinely fond of saying that I have a Southern heart and a Yankee mouth. So I talk a little loud and I talk a little fast, and if you need me to slow down a little, or if you need me to, occasionally lower the volume, I'd be glad to do so. But I apologize for that ahead of time. And while I certainly wasn't born in North Carolina, I assure you I got here as fast as I could. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I've been on the campaign trail for much of a year, and I've been doing, this is a little change up maybe from what I would normally say, because I've been doing 5 or 6 stops a day, 4 or 5 counties a day, 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just popping in and out of Raleigh to see my wife and our little boy every once in a while, just because I'm so passionate about this issue. And but today, I feel a little different. I feel a little touched even more. And I talk to people all across North Carolina. But there was a comment. I had the opportunity last night to get here a little earlier, and I appreciate your hospitality and bringing me into town. I went over to your county fair, and I had the opportunity to walk around and talk to some folks. And there were some families there who, after the fair closed up, wanted to show me, their steeds that they were going to be showing today, and a variety of other issues. And I talked to some teachers, and I talked to some parents, and I talked to some people who, like most of our citizens across North Carolina, moms and dads who have hopes and dreams for their children in the future. And one father was struggling, and he wanted to share with me his information. There was a teacher there from our high school for 17 years who telling me about how the burdensome bureaucracy in Raleigh is strangling them and what's going on. And his father in particular said something to me that I thought was very touching. He talked about how his son is just graduated, told me that you guys are, I guess, expecting a new Walmart, and he's hoping that maybe he can get a job there. And he told me his daughter was fortunate. She had gotten a program, a scholarship. We have a Southwest Scholars Program, and she's over there, and she wants to become a teacher. And he had told his daughter, don't do that, there's no money in teaching. Be a pharmacist. And then he said, but how do you tell your little girl not to go after her dreams? And he finally, I thanked him for his time. It was late, they had a long day, and I really thanked him for taking me behind the scenes, showing me a little bit about their lives and their family. And he said something to me that was, it rubbed me a little bit. And I'm going to quote him, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody, but I think it's important to say. And I talked to my wife about it late, and we prayed about it a little bit this morning. It's kind of hard on me. He said, I want to thank you for coming here. A lot of politicians don't come out of Raleigh. He says, they don't come here. They think we're all poor and dumb. They think we're poor and dumb, and they think all the answers come from Raleigh. They think they know what's best for our children and our families, and they don't come here. And I'm sorry, that moves me a little bit. I know what that's like. I grew up in and out of projects and low-income housing. I was one of these free and reduced lunch kids. My dad worked in a steel mill for 25 years after an 8th grade education. And I worked in some of those mills myself to save some money to put myself through college. And I spent the better part of my life after I graduated college in the service of others because of a man who got involved in my life. I was blessed while I was in a poor community. I had a pastor who got involved in my life when I was a child, a gentleman named Anthony Sobieski, who was part of that greatest generation and came back and went on the factory lines in Westinghouse, and then went with his Social Security money, opened up a little church in the projects and took us kids around in his church van with duct tape. And everything I learned good in this life, I learned inside that little church. I learned how to read the King James Version of the Bible at an early age, so when I got to high school, reading Shakespeare was not a problem. I learned how to sing, and I learned, and more than just the love of God and Christ and for my fellow man, I learned basic things that I wasn't learning in projects around this country. I learned how to treat a woman, how to treat my wife, how to treat my children, how to raise your children the way you're supposed to, how to do different things that one another should do for one another, and how we should treat one another. And I think the way some of our communities across North Carolina are treated by Raleigh is shameful. It's a sin. And I firmly believe all the answers don't come out of Raleigh. And particularly with education, they certainly shouldn't be coming from Washington. And you heard a little bit about our system in Wake County. I've spent, well, let me digress a minute, and it may take me off track an extra minute. Hopefully you'll forgive me if I go an extra minute or two, a little more, but let me digress for a second. That pastor, there was a point in my life, I was 14. This is a personal story I don't usually share on the trail too much, but there was a hard point in my life. There was a real hard challenge. I felt close in my spiritual relationship with God, but I felt real rough in life. And the world around me wasn't looking good in the poor neighborhood I grew up in. And I said to this pastor, I said, I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to go home to heaven. And there's a little boy saying that, and he doesn't want to live anymore. You would think most pastors, and particularly one who was like my grandfather my whole life, would show this compassion. And his whole life he always did. But this one moment in time he didn't. This one moment in time he looked me in the face and he said, you know what? Tough. You don't get to go home now. You have work to do. And every day of your life that you are here, every one of you, we have work to do. It is a blessing and a gift of God. We have work to do. And I took that as the charge and the calling of my life and everything I do. And I went on in the service of others. I went on to help other kids get an education. I went on to help raise hundreds of millions of dollars in scholarship programs. Went on to be a city manager in a community up north. They actually, one of my first jobs, they sent me out to New York City, and I was working down in that area, and that's a whole nother different world. It was a big different world from a kid growing up in the Pittsburgh area. But I raised hundreds of millions of dollars for universities to help kids get scholarships and programs, and then went on and helped run programs for children in a project called Harbor House. We helped 8,000 homeless children a year who were abused or abandoned. And then when I came to North Carolina, children's charity, Big Brothers Big Sisters. And I spent 3 years building a program in the state called Mentoring Children of Prisoners to get role models, people like Anthony, involved in these children's lives, 13,000 of them across North Carolina, bringing in millions of dollars in resources and systems that had to work together and get these people talking. And I learned something that was a startling fact for me. Our systems understand complexities of the way they're setting us up for failure better than we know. Our prison systems are designed and calculate components of failure in education in their projections. And they're building beds for kids who haven't even had a shot yet. And I found that a sin. I was one of these kids. And our systems, some of the systems that we built to help us are hurting us, particularly when it comes to education. The Wake County school system, you heard, is pretty big. It's kind of crazy. It's actually a $1.4 billion system, and that's after we just cut $100 million. It was huge. 18,000 employees, and it was running amok on families, and it had some crazy busing for social diversity programming. They'd bus kids an hour each way, and it's not a rural community. They'd go past 20 different schools, and every year they'd reassign them. We had a cultural reassignment where they would change one school for second grade, another school for third grade, a different school for fourth grade in an effort to balance out quotas. And it was never working because we're growing 5,000 kids a year, and we can't keep up. We're building 4 or 5 schools a year, and you can't keep up. We've got 20 consecutive years of growth of thousands and thousands of students into the public school system, and they can't keep up. And their efforts at social engineering and their efforts of bureaucracy have built bigger and bigger to the point where they had 5 buildings that were just for central administration, where no one was teaching anything, a bunch of middle managers managing something and not helping anybody. So the parents had enough, and they decided to make some serious change and elect a board that was committed to making those changes. And that's what you heard. We had 77% in my race several years ago, and that was in a district that leans Democrat. And these people know I'm strong conservative. On CNN, Comedy Central, Stephen Colbert had me on there. Tea Party Tedesco has come to resegregate the South. They tried to make it all this big national crisis. And the big Reverend Barber with the NAACP led a protest in the streets of Raleigh with 5,000 people chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, John Tedesco, gotta go." All right? Because these people, they didn't want common sense anymore. They didn't want what I wanted, which was to put the parents back in their child's education, to get the bureaucrats out of our classrooms so our teachers can teach once again, to get back to basics so our kids can read. Our schools have gone crazy across North Carolina and across America. Have you seen what's going on out there? We have bureaucrats going nuts to the point where our teachers spend more time jumping through hoops for Raleigh and jumping through hoops for Washington than they do teaching. We have chicken nugget police now looking into your lunch boxes. And all the while, they're excited and they go on a campaign tour talking about when they get 1 tick up or 2 ticks down, or we moved up 1 point from 42nd in the country to 41st in the country in education. They go back and forth and they celebrate this. I'm not excited by the fact that I've seen what 100 years of Democratic control in education and countless education governors can do for North Carolina. Here's the results. They've failed our children. 1 in 5 children in North Carolina do not graduate. 2/3 of those who do graduate need remediation courses. That cost those children twice in lost opportunities. That cost you as taxpayers twice. 1/3 of all of our children across the state cannot read on grade level. All right? I am fundamentally convinced the failures in education are designed to set us up for an entitlement society. This is not acceptable, and it's not sustainable. We are losing intellectual capital and moral fiber and an understanding of what it's like to be America in this country faster than we're losing Social Security, I promise you. The numbers are mounting. We have 1.5 million children in this country, in this state, in our public schools. 1.5 million in our public schools in North Carolina. We're 4th in the country in suspensions. Our discipline is run amok. Our schools are out of hand, and when you got that many kids who can't read or can't graduate or can't find a job, what are we going to be 20 years from now? Maybe we win the war this year, or we win the battle this year. But Abraham Lincoln told us it's the education of this generation that will be the politics of the next generation. We're not losing the war to the liberal media We're losing it because we're losing the hearts and minds of our children, and they can't discern the garbage from the liberal media.
There you go.
We have to get involved in education. I know Republicans haven't always been very active in education as much as I would like to see them be. I'm a strong national defense guy, and I'm a strong proponent of many of these things. And I'm willing to rock the boat. I'll tell you, in Raleigh, not only, we took all 169 schools, and it took a couple of years of doing this and setting up the logistics, and all the senior administrative skills I have were put to the test. When we worked together, we converted all 169 schools to a parental choice model. Let the schools compete off one another. Let them compete with the local schools, the local charter schools, the public schools. Let the parents pick what's best for them. All right? You want the traditional school, the year-round school, the magnet school. You want a home school. You want a charter school. You pick. You're the mom and dad. Now, we had to balance out some basics. I can't have 3,000 kids in a school with 1,000 seats. We had a couple tiebreakers. If you have a sibling in the school, you get priority. If you live in what's called a walk zone, 1.5 mile radius, you get priority before we made it work. And then while everybody was watching the big trick about the student assignment and all the national news thinking, oh, it's going to resegregate and everything by letting parents choose, what they didn't watch was what we were doing behind the scenes. First, after having a 40-year entrenched educator who knew better than everybody else and how the system works, we had to remove our former superintendent. He had to go, okay? Because that wasn't working. And we replaced him with a general, General Anthony Tata from the 82nd Airborne Division. General Tata had been leading 30 bases in Afghanistan and 90,000 troops over there, and one of my colleagues, more liberal colleague on our board, she goes, well, that's great, Mr. Tedesco, he can shoot and kill, but can he teach? And I said, you know what, that's ridiculous. We have 18,000 great teachers. Actually, it's a little less than that, some are administrators, etc., but we have 18,000 great teachers, is what I said. They don't need another teacher. We need a leader. We need a leader. And that's the problem with North Carolina's education system today. We lack leadership. Our current superintendent, who's been there for 8 years, has been at the Department of Public Instruction in that entrenched Raleigh bureaucracy since 1976. In Raleigh, they joke about it. It's a clown. They call it the Pink Palace, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The Pink Palace. It's a joke. 800 bureaucrats on 6 floors, spending nearly $400 million just in there, where their sole focus is predominantly bureaucratic oversight. That's not going to cut it anymore. We have to change the culture. All the answers can't come from Raleigh. What I want to do is go in there and flip the model. I want to streamline their operations, reduce their costs, and turn it around from bureaucratic oversight to customer service. And while we make it lean, we still have to have a State Department of Education, and we have to make it mean, because we have to be able to stand up against encroaching federal agendas that are not right for our children. We have to be able to do that. It is critical. But to do that, you have to have strong leadership. We don't have to have leadership like we have now. Our current superintendent, who takes public financing for her campaign and then takes out that money and gives it to NAACP, Mr. Barber and his crowd to go work her campaign for her with $250,000 of your money. Then she takes that money and goes out and hires all these liberal consultants to go run all these crazy, ridiculous things. They're wasting millions and millions of dollars over there that could be going to our schools. In the last several years alone, they've wasted millions of dollars on new technology upgrades for the Pink Palace, and cloud-based servers, and a new software data system that they ultimately ended up not using because after they spent money on it, well, it wasn't going to work anyway. A training conference center for our educators out on Ocracoke Island so they can have a nice, pretty conference center for training and all this other stuff. They've done all this while our teachers have gone without and had to buy their own supplies, while classrooms across North Carolina have gone without textbooks. That is ridiculous, and it needs to stop. I'm going to wrap up here in a minute. Sorry. I'm sorry, I get a little passionate about this. I think our children are worth fighting for. I think it's the future of our North Carolina. I think our children deserve better, and quite frankly, our future depends on it. We have to build a better educated workforce in this state. We have to expand vocational opportunities and get out of this one-size-fits-all education, because we know not every child is going to college. And there's thousands of jobs here in North Carolina that we don't have the skilled labor to take. We have to get back to basics. Let's get out of the fact that we spend more time teaching sex ed than reading. Let's teach our kids how to read again. Let's get back to some fundamentals. Let's empower our parents to get involved and be engaged and have a say in the education of their child at every level. And finally, I think we need to, and this is part of our plan, we have a card there. This talks about our 4-point plan. We have to teach American cultural values again in our schools. We have to free markets, because children don't learn that through osmosis. You actually have to teach it to them. We spend more time teaching global studies now. So we have to make a cultural shift in how we do things. With all that said, I'm going to wind down. I'll tell you just 3 quick things about the post of the state superintendent. Short of having a bully pulpit, which you can see I'll use loudly. They are the chief administrator for that department. And a strong superintendent won't be marginalized and just go around playing nice. We'll go in there and realign that department. Additionally, though, they are a member of our council of state. And in North Carolina, that's a little different than most states. It's still part of a Jacksonian style of government that decentralizes power from the governor. Our council of state actually, as a majority, has an independent body where they vote on various things like state contracts, increasing debt ceilings, and impacting or making changes to our death penalty procedures in North Carolina. And we've never had a conservative council of state in North Carolina. We've never, the first superintendent, 1868, Calvin Wiley, was a Democrat, and we've never had a Republican one since. And I'll tell you what, I was just at a poll luncheon with Civitas on Thursday. Even in 2008, when Obama only won North Carolina by 14,000 votes, and Pat and Bev were really close, and everything was so close, our current superintendent won by 8 points, because they have all the special interest groups, the Teachers Association, the Administrators Associations, and all these people behind her. But at the poll luncheon the other day, in the history of North Carolina, they said this race is now the closest it's ever been. It's 1 point. I'm behind by 1 point. Wow. 1 point. The Democratic consultant there, you guys might know Brad Cronin, said he was at the luncheon. So Brad says, they know they can't win Pat's race. They know they can't put enough money into Dalton to prop him up. So they're focusing all their efforts on creating what they call a break wall for our council of state. Putting money behind Linda Coleman's race against my friend Dan Forrest. You got to get out there and vote for Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, Ed Goodwin, all these folks. Because they're trying to use this council of state to create a break wall. Because their fear is, if they, a lot of people go to the polls, vote governor, vote president, and leave. They're done. Undervotes. We had 250,000 undervotes in superintendent race last time. And their fear is, if that flood crosses that break wall, it will change the face of North Carolina, because it will go down the line and change every county commissioner's race, school board's races, Senate, House seats, all of that across the state with that conservative flood coming. So they're putting everything they can into this so-called break wall strategy they have. The Democratic Party has a bus tour going with the 4 liberal women, with June Atkinson, Elaine Marshall, and all these folks, and they're paying for that. We need your help. We need you to spread the word on why these races are important. But we spend more time just telling people about these races and positions. And while most of our House seats and even our Senate seats, and no disrespect to our colleagues here in that role, and I really greatly appreciate them incredibly, in many cases they're covering a handful of counties or a portion of several counties, and most of those races are securing $100,000 or better, and almost all of our Council of State folks were lucky to get $10,000 in the month of July between the 9 of us. People don't understand the races. My wife Jenny and I believe in this enough. We took what was left of our own savings. She makes $38,000 a year as an administrator. We're living off that, and I'm just driving around and we're just putting gas in the car. I'm spending $75 a day on gas just to drive around and talk to people about these issues. So we need your help. Please tell people, tell your friends. It's time to get uncomfortable in North Carolina. We can't just sit and talk in rooms like this. We have to tell our people in our churches and our neighbors and our families, even when it's uncomfortable conversations. We have to take our country back, and we have to make sure we do it with our children as well. I thank you very much. I have a card on the table. You can go to our website, learn more. A little bit of money we were able to raise. We bought those cards, and I'm really conservative. So please don't waste one. Would you please give it to a friend for me? And also, if I ask 2 final things, if you can, in any way, we have a few envelopes on the table. If you're willing to give us a small donation, even help us with a couple tanks of gas as we're traveling around, I appreciate that. And then finally, just keep me and my family in your prayers over the next few weeks. Out of Raleigh, they attack me left and right and call me the devil, because education's the holy grail of liberals. But Hitler knew that. What did Hitler do? He went after the youth. What's the Communist Manifesto say? Go after the youth. So we have to take this fight to them. I promise you, I'll always fight for our families and our children. I was forged in that steel country like those steel beams that we worked with. I will always fight. I will never waver or bend for my principles for our children or our taxpayers. So just keep us in your prayers. So thank you.